Game Freak has slowly been making Switch versions of all the Pokemon spin-off titles. We got a new Pokemon Snap, a Pokemon Dungeon remake, and Detective Pikachu. Not all of them are winners. But I do hope that Game Freak will reach into the backlog and pull out their cult DS trilogy, the Pokemon Ranger franchise, for the remake treatment someday. In the meantime though, I can only dream of what a new Ranger game for the Switch would look like, and I'm going to share that dream with you. Welcome to a new series of videos where I'll be proposing my own versions of video games. Right, so for those that don't really know what a Ranger game entails, or maybe just know it as that one Pokemon spin-off game Jaiden Animations talked about, I'll go over the basics so we're all on the same page. Unlike the mainline games, Pokemon Rangers don't use Pokeballs. Instead, to get a Pokemon on your team, you need to capture them. You do this by drawing circles around the Pokemon using your stylus. In the first game, you needed to have a certain number of circles done in a row, but in its sequel, this was changed to a health bar, where completing a loop will increase the Pokemon's friendship towards you. The Pokemon you capture can help you overcome obstacles in the overworld, using things called field moves. These can break rocks, cut trees, put out fires, etc. These abilities have a level rating to them, and you'll need strong Pokemon to tackle bigger obstacles. But you can also combine the strengths of weaker Pokemon to match the power required as well, allowing the players a bit of freedom in how they want to tackle a problem. Say if a player is having trouble capturing a Blastoise, they can try and find 3 Squirtles instead. The trade-off being 3 Pokemon take up more slots in your team, and finding all 3 Pokemon is harder than finding 1 Blastoise. That's not all you can use your Pokemon for. You can also summon these Pokemon to help you in capturing using capture assists. These give your stylus the same type as the summoned Pokemon, making capturing easier. Normally by hindering the Pokemon's movement in some way, like bubbles, a grass wall, or slowing Poison Sludge. The Pokemon will leave your party if you use them for a field move or for their assist. The only exception is your partner Pokemon, whose ability is put on a cooldown instead. This makes Pokemon Ranger more of a resource management game when it comes to team building than having the strongest Pokemon. What kind of assists do you need? If you capture more Pokemon than your party limit, which do you get rid of? Do you save that assist for the next fight, or use it now? Obviously, the game isn't as deep as I'm making it out to be, but it could be. The series has potential, especially in modern day gaming, and I want to present what my version of that modern day Pokemon Ranger game might be. Right, we're finished with the yapping, it's game design time. For this design challenge, I want to make some things clear. First, what I propose must be something that Game Freak can actually make. It's gotta line up and scale with other spin-off titles. Second, I'm going to try and keep in line with modern day Pokemon design trends. The original trilogy, released between Pokemon Emerald and Black and White, I want this to be a way to modernize the series with what we're used to in Pokemon games nowadays, such as character creation and 3D environments. And lastly, to build off the previous point, this is more going to be a reboot than a remake. Think of it the same way Breath of the Wild took the Zelda series' core concepts and changed to them. I'll go into it more later, but Pokemon Ranger's mechanics are built with the DS's hardware in mind, so changes have to be made with it moving to the Switch. Instead, I'm going to be carrying over the main core of a Ranger game over specific mechanics. So what is the core of a Ranger game? Well, I've boiled it down to 3 nifty design pillars for you. Pokemon capturing. You rotate your team constantly, as Pokemon are less a team of friends that you grow with, but instead co-workers that you ask to help complete that one task you can't do. We want to emphasize the resource management part of team building, and luckily, Pokemon Ranger does this really well. We also want capturing Pokemon to be fun. This is an activity the player will be doing frequently after all. Community. The whole point of a Pokemon Ranger is to help those around them. The games have already done this by letting players take on quests to help townspeople, but there are definitely ways to improve this. Exploration. Pokemon Ranger games have surprisingly small maps, and due to this, the player will backtrack to the same place several times over their playthrough. I think we should keep the small map, instead of focusing on dense maps that allow for exploration each time you revisit over the linear maps mainline games have. So, here is my pitch for Pokemon Ranger for the Switch. Welcome to the Pokemon Sanctuary, a set of islands made to keep and monitor Pokemon in the wild. You play as a new Ranger here to help establish this as a new major Ranger HQ. Said HQ and research base surrounding it are still under construction, but we'll put a pin in that for now. During your tour of the base, you'll have a tutorial of how to capture Pokemon using the new Pulse Styler, and this is a great place to start talking about our first design pillar. The Pulse Styler is my solution to the touchscreen-based capture mechanics seen in the DS games. You see, there aren't many great ways to make the old system work on the Switch. While there is a touchscreen, and you can use a Joy-Con like you would a Wii remote, these controls are not built for what Pokemon Ranger asks for. So instead, I propose this. In the same way, the old styler is based on a spinning top, this pulse styler is based on a yo-yo. Your character can fling it out, and when it hits its max length, it releases a pulse that acts the same way as a completed loop in the old games. This effect can also be achieved prematurely by hitting something or pressing the throw button again. The burst increases friendship with any Pokemon in its radius, so you can capture multiple Pokemon at once. You can even hold down the throw button to charge a shot like you can in the old games. Captures play out similarly to boss fights in Legends Arceus, but instead of throwing balls, you hit the Pokemon with your styler, lock onto your target and beat them with the power of friendship. You are not bound by your starting styler though. Like unlocking more powerful Pokeballs, you gain styler upgrades as you level up and complete side quests. These are permanent upgrades. For example, as you leveled up in the DS games, your styler's trail would get longer and fill up friendship bars quicker, allowing for easier captures. This can easily be added by making the pulse styler's radius bigger and more powerful. The other upgrades are ones that reduce certain damage types. This is harder to translate, as instead of avoiding Pokemon with your styler, you're going out of your way to hit them with it. For this reason, I'm changing the upgrades into badges that the player can equip to give themselves different abilities, bonuses, etc. Like the charms from Hollow Knight. You get a certain amount of slots you can use for badges and get fun add-ons like ones that give you a quick time feature to make fights easier, or one that makes your styler throws shorter but you can perform them rapidly. Pokemon Rangers gameplay is very repetitive, and adding these can give the player fun challenges, make the game easier for those struggling, and give people different gameplay experiences. Speaking of things being changed, capture assists need to work differently as well. The game no longer has a 2D battle map to alter to your favour with capture assists, so how do we translate these into 3D? How capture assists work developed with each game. Honestly, the original Ranger Assist table hurts to look at, with each assist being the same with a different visual effect. Shadows of Armia started to make assists different, and then Signs just went off the rails with it. So here's the table for the first two games, and now here's the table for Signs. The reason Signs is so different is you actively place the Pokemon you're choosing on the battlefield, so different Pokemon have different moves they perform. I want to keep this for our new Ranger game. I don't expect Game Freak to give each individual monster their own assist, but 3 different ones for each type feels manageable. Give them different power levels, like with Guardian Signs, call it a day. For the Pokemon placement, where they'd perform their assist on the battlefield, the player should stand where they want their Pokemon to be and then send them out, like how you do in modern Pokemon titles. The player character would then step back, having their Pokemon take up where they were standing, allowing the player to continue their capture with the help of their Pokemon. This then plays well with the badge system, choosing Pokemon and badges that pair nicely. For example, that badge that allows for rapid close combat would probably combine well with a fighting type assist where the Pokemon has to be up close to perform their best. While there are definitely other ways a loop system could work, maybe something like Patch Quest's Lasso, I feel that newer Pokemon games are going to stick with 3D environments over going back to top-down 2D. And also, Legends Arceus was a great foundation for the kind of Ranger game I want to see. Honestly, this video should just be why Legends Arceus should have been a Pokemon Ranger game. Oh, and about that capture tutorial from the beginning of this section, this is where you pick your partner Pokemon. In Shadows of Almia, players get to choose their partner Pokemon. These are Pokemon that stay with you throughout your journey. They're the closest to Pokemon's traditional party members that the Ranger games get. The reason why I make the distinction with Almia is that both Guardian Signs and the original game forced Pokemon partners onto you. You didn't get to choose. I like being able to choose my partner Pokemon. I think it adds to the level of customizability and also lets you work with different gameplay styles. So we're gonna keep with Almia's version of partners for this new game. Almia already did a very good job with partners, having one for each type in the game, where you unlock them by doing side quests and keeping them on a cute little farm. Very nice, but I think we can do better, so welcome to the Partner Farm 2.0. Just like Almia, there's one for each type with 2 caveats. 1, they're 3-stage Pokemon, and 2, no starter Pokemon. If I want a starter Pokemon as my partner, I'll just go play the mainline games. I want a Pokemon game that gives me one of the weird guys and says, we're gonna make you love this weird little freak. Like the Nascule line. My homies love the Nascule line. I wanted to make more monotypes as well, due to how dual types are handled in the Ranger series, where one type is their capture assist and one type is their field move, but partners don't get field moves. They're only good for capture assists. so I think having some as dual types is fine for now. Here's the best list I could make. I also tried to vary what gens are represented, but I leaned more towards the newer gens because I've seen enough Pokemon games focusing on Gen 1 Pokemon. I want new guys. But why do they have to be 3-stage evolutions? I hear you asking in this convenient transition. I think it would be cool if your partners evolved the more that you use them. We have something like this with Ukulele Pichu, where its assists get stronger over the course of the game. There's a part of me that just wants to give each partner their own assist, like Ukulele Pichu, but that might be a bit too much to ask for. If they did have their own moves, it would be a good reason to seek them out. I'm also fine with them being overpowered, as you can only have one partner per team, and it makes a great reward for investing in that Pokemon. So as you use your partner more, they evolve and get stronger. Friendship and the player's connection to their Pokemon is a core part of the Pokemon franchise, and that brings us nicely to talking about our next pillar. Pokemon Rangers help people in Pokemon, and luckily the original trilogy convey this really well. Alongside the main quest, players can take on side quests to receive rewards like styler upgrades and new Pokemon partners. And I want to keep that the same for the new game, so we can finally take that pin out. The Pokemon Sanctuary is the newest ranger base, built to collect data of Pokemon in the wild and help people and Pokemon socialise with each other better. The Sanctuary isn't that big, but it is split up into 5 parts, 4 outer islands and the base. The islands will be talked about more when we get to our third pillar, but the base is where the game mainly fulfills our second design pillar. This is your Jubilife village, your Dirtmouth, your House of Hades, a home base where the player will frequently return to, and will expand and develop as you both progress through the story and complete side quests for the residents. At the centre of everything is the Ranger HQ. The Ranger Union building from the DS titles always felt huge to me, a single screen unable to contain its size. And I want players to have the same experience with this new base, it being a structure you can see from almost anywhere on the map. With it being the most important building in the game, I want its insides done properly, Game Freak. Like any building from Yokai Watch, I want it to be a fully realised space you can traverse. Not the school from Scarlet and Violet. I like walking around buildings in video games, Game Freak, let me have this! The base will have facilities you'd expect from a modern Pokemon game. Things like a general items shop, clothes shop, and a salon, but I'd like most of these to be unlocked through quests. Not difficult ones, just ones that make the player have a more personal investment in their addition. Something like the shop where players can get some starting badges from is run by a kid, but he wants to make sure you're cool enough for him to show you some of his best badges. So he asks you to capture a Pokemon and bring it to him. The thing is, since he's a kid, he doesn't really know every Pokemon's name, so he describes the Pokemon he wants to see. Say, bring me the Pokemon that looks like a giant green mountain with a face on its chest. The player then has to re-examine the Pokemon that they know to figure out that the Pokemon the kid is asking for is Tyranitar. Bring that Pokemon to the kid and you'll get more badges added to the item shop. As stated earlier, both Legends Arceus and the original trilogy do these quests well, having fun and charming quest lines. I want players to feel like their actions have a bigger impact on the space over these facilities just being unlocked as the story progresses. This is where the major gameplay changes come in. Ranger games are built on backtracking. The player returns to previous places with new information often as the story progresses. A door you passed within your first hour may be hiding something you need for the final boss. Pokemon that you find in later areas are literal keys to exploring new parts of older locations. And to me, this sounds a lot like a Metroidvania. I'm not saying to go all out with it, just implement elements of the genre into Ranger to make backtracking more rewarding. Maybe it's just that I've recently played Cassette Beasts, but catching creatures, then having them help you progress in ways that you couldn't before feels amazing, and would slot nicely into a new Ranger game. So how do we implement this? Well, some Pokemon have special field moves, ones unique to that Pokemon. While they're normally used for puzzles, some Pokemon are used for traversal. Nowadays in Pokemon, players get ride Pokemon, and they're normally just handed to you as you progress through the story. I want to challenge that. Instead, players must seek out and catch their own ride Pokemon. Let there be a few different options so that players can choose between, so their experience feels unique. Something like choosing between a Staraptor, a Skarmory, etc. After it's captured, it'll act as a summon players can access at almost any point. Said chosen Pokemon will come running or swoop down to get you, like your horse in Breath of the Wild, or the other ride Pokemon we've seen throughout the mainline series. I hope this will add both an incentive to seek out and catch new Pokemon, but also give catching Pokemon new adventurous joy over just filling out the Pokedex. Players get to wonder what will this new Pokemon unlock, allowing for a great curiosity Pokemon games should instill. There will still be a capture dex though, and rewards for filling it out. Standard Pokemon stuff. Now, while concepting this pitch, I kept going back and forth if this game should be open world or not. Pokemon's change to an open world format, I believe, has been for the better, but it doesn't fit with my idea for a ranger game. I want each zone to be dense, focusing on small areas with a lot to do and find over just vast open space. For this reason, the fly assist will mainly work in the way it does in earlier games, being a set of checkpoints you can fast travel to. Though, unlike Legends, you can travel to different zones without having to go back to base. I honestly don't know why they didn't do that, but oh well. Backtracking is an important part of the Ranger series and Metroidvanias, and with bringing parts of the Metroidvania genre into the Ranger series, I want players to mainly backtrack on foot, so they have the opportunity to find things they may have missed. If you were to add flying to the game, I'd want it to be more a glide, like Breath of the Wild, over something you can do continuously, like with Braviary, or the legendary lizards. We can't have players choosing puzzles by just flying over obstacles. With the gameplay pillars addressed, it's time for the other stuff Ranger games have. Like most Pokemon games, there's an evil group doing stuff that you, as the protagonist, must stop. And this extends to the Ranger franchise. For our game, the group will be the Pokemon Pinchers, a returning evil group from Guardian Scions. They won't be a direct continuation from the Guardian Scions group, just so new players can understand who they are, but I like some nods for those who have played the previous games. Something the Ranger series is used to. I don't have any story stuff for them to do, it's just that these guys are there. Again, not a story pitch, more a mechanical one. Out of the new stuff Pokemon has released, be it DLCs and the Legends series, they've added some kind of new Pokemon. And while this is probably just for the mainline games, I feel like it would soon bleed over into the spin-offs. Also, Pokemon Ranger isn't a stranger to having a unique Pokemon added to boost sales. For this video, I was originally going to make some Fakeamon, but my deadline is coming fast, so maybe that's something for another video. I'd imagine that the Sanctuary is housing some very specific Pokemon, ones that haven't been seen in other regions, and that is why the Pokemon Pinchers are going after the Pokemon Sanctuary. And that's my idea for a new Pokemon Ranger game. This video was a lot compared to my other videos, including doing a lot of research into this franchise I care about. My risps would hate me if I subjected them to 3 Ranger games in the time it took me to make this video. So while I replayed some of Guardian Scions for footage, a lot of my base information was found on other people's videos of this franchise, and I want to shout out those people as a thank you. So first we obviously have Jaiden Animations' video on Almia. It was a great refresher on a Ranger plot as a whole, and I'm sure most people's introduction to the series if you weren't a Pokemon fan in the early 2000s. I don't really have to tell you to watch Jaiden's stuff, it's great. The main one I want to shout out is Retro and Chill's Retrospectives on the trilogy. They helped a lot with understanding in-depth mechanics and how the games developed through their releases. If this video has made you interested in the franchise, go give those videos a watch. They're very comprehensive, funny, and just really informative about what Pokemon Ranger is. And lastly, if you saw this video and thought, this seems like those JelloApocolypse videos, where they make their own Pokemon or Animal Crossing games, you'd be right. I love these videos and I want more of them, and I figured I'd just have to do it myself for games that I want to see sequels to. Expect more videos like this in the future, maybe not all Pokemon related. I just like putting my own game design bachelor's towards something. Any video I've mentioned should be in the iCards if I can figure out how to get that working, and the description. And we have N-card price there, just to say thank you to PBs for some additional art that was used in this video. I developed a repetitive strain injury while making this video. I just have one and it flared up a lot while this video was in progress, and they were really nice enough to help with making some of the assets for this video so I could get it out within a manageable time. The stuff will be in the description, so go hand them some support for helping me. Okay, price out. Thank you for watching the video to its end.